The Rugby Business Network is a global organisation that connects senior business people who put their resources back into the rugby community in a sustainable way. Our members share values, the values of rugby, and we connect them online or at our events. We can also make personal face-to-face introductions to business leaders who want to do larger deals together. Visit therugbybusinessnetwork.com and apply to become a member today.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this week's episode of the Rugby Business Network podcast, which is brought to you by CMME Mortgages. Now, for our UK listeners out there, CMME Mortgages, they're a market-leading provider on mortgage advice, specifically focusing on clients with complex incomes like business owners, contractors, or even affluent professionals. Since 2004, CMME Mortgages have been helping clients get the mortgage that they deserve by taking into consideration their client's full financial situation. Don't settle for an inferior mortgage which doesn't reflect your circumstances. Visit cmmemortgages.com/rugby and see how they can help you. Well, you picked a good episode to listen to, as we have lined up a Springbok rugby legend who is still very much involved in the sport as a rugby commentator and analyst. He also spends much of his time as the director of Pivotal Capital, which he co-founded in 2012. We are joined by the one and only Joel Stransky. Joel, it's a privilege to have you join us on the Rugby Business Network podcast. I can't believe it's taken us this long to get you on as a guest. I should have happened quite a long time ago. Thank you for giving up some of your time to chat with us.
Yeah, it's only with pleasure, and nice to be on the network, nice to be chatting.
Fantastic. Well, Joel, many rugby supporters around the world, when they hear the name Joel Stransky, they are instantly reminded of your famous dropkick in extra time to beat the All Blacks in the 1995 Rugby World Cup final. And how can they not? I mean, it's such an iconic moment in rugby history. How does it make you feel, though, that you are predominantly thought of, perhaps, by current players and rugby fans alike for that one particular moment in your career?
Well, there's two sides to that, I suppose. One is, I'd love to be remembered as the crash tackling fly who knocked our guys over, but that was never going to be, was it? So, I suppose there's two elements. The one is, obviously, there's a little bit of reticence around it, because I think there was a whole lot more to my game than just kicking and in particular one drop kick. But having said all that, and for all the other thoroughly enjoyable moments I had on the rugby field, there's a lot of players who go through careers and play loads of test matches and never have that one pinnacle moment that stands out way and above the others. So from that perspective, and it is an incredible, and especially to have achieved it in a World Cup final at a time of uncertainty in our country with Mandela, lifting the trophy, it just made it all that more special. I was very lucky and very, very privileged to get it right on the day.
Yeah, and all these years later, over 2 decades, we still get goosebumps when we happen to catch images of that incredible day. Now, when most people meet you, Joel, I'm pretty sure they want to know more about the final at Ellis Park and that infamous dropkick. I'm more interested to know, what was the highlight for you from the whole World Cup in 95 away from the final?
So I think, in life as you get older, you realize certain moments in a period were more important than others that held more meaning. If you'd asked me, straight after the World Cup, I would have definitely said, lifting the trophy, winning the World Cup, maybe the drop goal, real rugby moments. But I think as we get older and wiser, and we get to understand our nation and our culture, our cultures and cultural differences, I think you start thinking differently about experiences. And for me, as I look back on that time, what was absolutely the most amazing couple of experiences was meeting Mandela. He came and joined us before the opening game for one of our training sessions, and we had tea with him, and he wished us luck. And then he was in the change room with us, just before the kickoff of the World Cup final. And probably the most iconic memory of all is him celebrating as Francois lifted the trophy, and that for me kicked on to other things. I went and had lunch with him at his house, my wife and I and another couple, just 5 of us at the table, and spent 3 or 4 hours with him. I've chatted to him at dinners, and so that what the World Cup did for me, it brought me closer to that great icon. It allowed me time in his company, and it allowed me the vision of seeing him celebrating so enthusiastically at the final. Those are the things for me that stand out.
Yeah, incredible. Well, shifting away from your international career and looking at your club career, it consisted of playing for Natal and Western Province in South Africa, and then you also went on to play in Italy and at Leicester Tigers. Why did you decide to move around, and what was the standout differences for you, Joel, playing at home and in Europe?
And don't forget, I played once for the Blue Bulls as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was while I was in the Air Force. I chose to do my military training straight after school and then go to varsity. And so I had 2 years in Pretoria, and then I went off to Durban and Maritzburg and then Durban and settled, and I was there for a long time. And I think also, sometimes one needs a change. Sometimes, in fact, the old saying, change is as good as a holiday. I think I'm one of those people. I need change. I need different challenges, different adventures. I need to, be pushed out my comfort zone and get moving and do things a little differently. And I think as part of that, I saw rugby as a great vehicle to not only help facilitate change, but also to go and see the world and experience different cultures. Rugby took me to, as you quite rightly point out, I played in Italy, I played in France, I played in the UK, I played sevens tournaments in Israel and Czechoslovakia and Hungary and a couple of other European countries. It's been an incredible journey where this beautiful sport has taken me to all these great places.
Yeah.
So change is part of it, but also have suitcase must travel has always been part of who I am, I suppose.
And those experiences, they obviously came in the amateur era where the money you earned was barely enough to even buy beer after the game. And then in the latter half of your career, you played as a professional. Did you find it difficult to adapt during this time where the sport was undergoing this significant transformation?
So I don't think there was any trouble adapting as a rugby player, because irrespective of whether we were paid or not, we were always, I wouldn't say 100% professional, but we were certainly always very professional in the way we approached the game. We trained hard, we looked after ourselves, we were dedicated and committed, and I don't think that culture or ethos is any different between an amateur player and a professional player. You practice just as hard. You might now with more research and everything, the guys today certainly are a little more scientific and maybe a little more disciplined in certain things. There's much more knowledge available. But the attitude is exactly the same. I think for me, the difficulty in that transition was, as a senior player, there was a lot of politics and a lot happening off the field. And it was like the setting up of players' unions and talking to coaches about having representation. And that whole transition was never going to be easy. And there were a few of us that were involved that probably ultimately had found those few months or that season quite a tough season. And I think maybe as a result of that, maybe that's why I went to the UK and went to the Leicester Tigers. And that was properly enlightening, because from being involved in all the off the field drama and all the politics and all the sidetrack issues, I got to the UK and all I did was play the game. I went home after training. I grew up with my daughter. It was a really wonderful few years.
Well, speaking of the UK, Joel, some of our listeners may not be aware of the story that in the build-up to the 1999 Rugby World Cup, it was suggested that you could play for England. However, you did not qualify to do so in the end, if I'm not mistaken. Looking back now, was that something you were seriously considering, as your last game for the Springboks came in 96?
So actually, I got injured, and having met with Clive Woodward, and we discussed it, and then at the very next weekend, I got injured and did my knee ligament, so we didn't even consider the process. I think back on that time, and it would have been in a way quite exciting to be at another World Cup, maybe to be part of a different squad and a different culture. But ultimately, I'm not sure as a South African I could have gone through with that. I'm one of those actually whose blood is green, and having played for this wonderful country and having achieved so much for this wonderful country, I'm not sure it would ever have happened.
Well, planning for your career, Joel, after rugby is a whole lot different 20 years ago to what it is nowadays. What preparations did you put in place before retirement? Because from what I know, you dropped out of university and you didn't complete your BCom degree in order to be able to pursue a professional rugby career and, as you mentioned, be able to see the world.
Yeah, that's right, and that is the biggest regret I have in life, is that I didn't finish my degree and study further, and maybe even go on and specialize in some form or another, or at least do a postgrad. But that's life, and I've managed to overcome that disadvantage, and so I did go on a couple of other courses, a couple of other financial courses, especially. I've made sure I've always had strong mentorship, particularly as a youngster. When I finished playing the game, I've had strong people around me and try to take good advice. And I suppose the advice I would give to the youngsters out there today is don't make the mistake I made. Don't drop out and not finish. You've got time on your hands. Make sure you do get a degree and make sure you do plan for a career post rugby, because the reality is, most rugby players, and when I say most, probably 99% of rugby players who embark on a professional career do not make enough money to never work again. And the guys need to think post-rugby. They need to make sure that they've got a career, they've got something to go to. And I think the other side of that is not just the money side. It's the challenge. It's the purpose in life. It's the reason to get up and go and do something. We had a dreadful incident in rugby, in the last 12 months or so, where Dan Vickerman committed suicide. Now, there was a guy who had the world at his fingertips, but it seems he didn't really have a purpose. And so to all those players out there, make sure you've got a goal and a purpose for the day that this beautiful sport can no longer sustain us and enjoy us.
Yeah, most definitely. And Joel, did you have that plan in place in '99 when you hung up your boots? Did you know what was going to come next for you?
So I thought I was going to coach. I desperately wanted to be a coach, and I was already player coach at the Leicester Tigers. Dean Richards was manager of rugby. I was player coach. John Wells was the other coach, and between us we managed the way we played the game, and we were hugely successful. And then I was approached by the Bristol Rugby Club. Bob Dwyer was director of rugby, to go down there. And there was a huge fallout between Bob Dwyer and the CEO, and a massive drama. And I ultimately, it left such a bad taste that aside from the fact that I had to sue the club, it left such a bad taste that I came home, and we came back here. And at that point, I did not have a plan. And I was very fortunate. I came up to Johannesburg and met with a few people, and one of my great friends, George Rautenbach, took me under his wing eventually, and mentored me and gave me a start and helped me and got me on the commercial road in business. And for that grounding, I will always be absolutely hugely thankful to George. But most rugby players might not get that, which is why I'd say you've got to get out there and make sure you've got something to fall back on after rugby.
So would you say then, Joel, that you used your networking quite well when you came back home to try find out what Plan B was going to be?
So I think networking is part of it, and networking is certainly what you use once you're in your plan. But you've got to have some education to fall back on. You've got to have some expertise or knowledge in a particular field, and you've got to dive in. And I think the hard part for us rugby players is that you come out of the sport at the top of the game, and one of the senior players, senior execs. You're the big fish in a medium-sized sea, and then all of a sudden you go into corporate life or into the world of business, and all of a sudden you're a tiny little guppy in this massive ocean, and it is quite daunting at times. You almost have to start again, but that's part of life. It's about accepting that challenge and moving your way up the ladder.
And going back to that unfortunate situation with Bristol, do you have any regrets from that? And since then, have you ever had any thoughts of going into coaching professionally?
So I do have regrets. I have serious regrets, because I think I would have been a good coach. I'd like to think I'd have been a good coach. And I think as a former player and as someone who has coached and coached at a high level, to see young players, whether they're schoolboys or youngsters coming through, or top players for that matter, grow and do something that you've taught them to do, and to see the sense of satisfaction and achievement on their faces is for a coach the greatest reward one could ever have. And I miss that, to have nurtured a couple of young players out of the Leicester Tigers youth development program and watched them play 60, 70 test matches for their country, to have coached a couple of under 13 teams and seen them do a little backline move that we practice, score the try and win the game. Those little moments are things that you get in coaching, and the part of me is obviously misses the fact that I'm not getting to see those and get those. But then I see the other side of it. I see the coaches at Super Rugby level losing their hair and going grey and pulling their hair out week in, week out. And there's a part of me that goes, thank goodness I'm not there.
No, definitely. Well, Joel, let's talk business now. You are the co-founder and director of Pivotal Capital, which I mentioned earlier. For our listeners overseas, could you explain what your company does, and what are some of the challenges you experienced along the way to growing the business over these 6 years or so?
So we started out as very much a technology business. We'd now probably term ourselves a little bit more disruptive technology. The first company we started was in the voice biometric space, using your voice as a form of authentication. From there, we started building and managing the infrastructure and technology in call centers. We grew into some of the data analytics around call centers, management systems, information systems. We are now a Genesis global partner in the hybrid and hosted telephony space.
Wow.
So we're a business pretty much like life. We've evolved in the last 6 or 7 years as we've needed to, and as we've moved on and we've invested in other companies. We have an artificial intelligence business that plays in the recruitment and career guidance space. So it's funny how it goes, but they are in some way all interlinked. And we were two mates, in fact three. Well, we asked a third mate to join us. Three mates and our attorney, who are the shareholders in Pivotal Capital. And if I think back on our journey, it's not been an easy journey. To start a business in this country is tough. We had little or no funding in the beginning, and we worked out of my dining room and out of shared corporate office space for a while. And our biggest challenge, and today it's still the same, our biggest challenge at times is cash flow. We have a business that is profitable and that does nicely, but every now and then, a client or two don't pay timelessly, and we have cash flow issues. And I think for any startup business or any young business, that is the biggest challenge. It's not whether you're profitable or not, it's about managing your cash. And I think the key to our success is that we've surrounded ourselves with great people. We have unbelievably smart engineers and technologists and finance guys who work with us and are part of our group. And together we all somehow make it work. And we're growing. We'd love to grow a little faster and a little quicker. And who knows, maybe in the next year we'll kick on properly.
Brilliant. And what interested you, Joel, in this area of business? And are there any traits and skills that perhaps you've taken from your rugby playing days and are now using in business?
So my interest first came about from technology. I was approached and joined the LTech Netstar Group, and then became the CEO of the LTech Netstar Group, and that was my sort of first entrance into the technology space. As much as it was car and vehicle tracking technology, it was certainly the start of the technology journey. And then when we had the opportunity to set up the voice biometric business, and it looked quite exciting. It was really new. It was properly innovative. It was, and I spoke about it earlier, about needing adventure, needing challenges. For me, that was quite possibly something new and exciting and different and enormously interesting and challenging, because it was about science and technology that I knew nothing about. That really was attractive and inspiring. And I think part of that is wanting to be market leaders. It's wanting to be the first to bring something unique to the fore, to bring it to the market, and we're very proud to have done that. And in fact, our voice biometric business now is built on a universal platform, but it is the capability, the IP we've built on it is world leading. And Right now, we're busy being acquired into a Dutch group that is setting up a global entity, and we'll be a big part of that venture. So, it is exciting times, and that was our first move. And I think for us, that's just extrapolated out to understanding a bit more about technology, understanding a little bit more about where the world is going and what is needed, and trying to open new doors and new markets.
Yeah. So what would you say is the best advice or business advice that you've received over these years, Joel?
So the first bit, and I suppose it comes out of rugby as well, to answer your earlier question, is that as a leader in rugby, and even probably more importantly as a founder, as a CEO, or as a director, whatever your role is, the most important thing is to have people who complement you. And by that I mean people who have a different skill set to you, who think differently to you, who add value as opposed to just agreeing with you. We are inclined in life to surround ourselves at times with people who think like us, who we get on with, who are, we have the same goals and ambitions and the same thought processes. The goals and ambitions part are great. I think it's wonderful that you have the same goals and ambitions. But for me in business, the critical factor is if I employ someone or I partner with someone who thinks just like me, I actually don't need that person. I need to employ and partner with people who think differently, who do things differently, who challenge me, who debate and argue in a positive way, but together we come out with outcomes that are unique and forward-thinking as opposed to the same old.
Very interesting. Well, Joel, your business career is not what most people these days will know you for. They know Joel Stransky as the rugby commentator and analyst at SuperSport. Was this a career path you envisaged after hanging up your rugby boots?
So no, I sort of evolved into it as well in 1999 when the Rugby World Cup was in the UK, what happened is SuperSport phoned me and said, look, we know you're not playing, we know you're not involved, do you fancy doing some commentary? I said, well, look, I've never done that before. And they said, well, Hugh Bladen will be our anchor commentator, you'll be our expert, and we'll get Hugh to train you up and coach you and teach you. And that's exactly what happened. I arrived for a commentators meeting one night in London. I'd driven down from Leicester, and Hugh gave me one or two tips, and we had a little bite to eat and a whiskey, and the next day we did our first game together, and what a journey that was. What an unbelievable human being Hugh Bladen is, and an icon as a global sports commentator, as a rugby commentator. He is the voice of rugby still. And to have been taught and mentored and trained by Hugh, and to have enjoyed so many wonderful games and test matches with him has been an incredible journey. And it's hard to believe now it's 19 years. I've been doing this for 19 years, and I still love it. It's still wonderful to be at the games. It's still incredible to be at the test matches and to be close to our Springbok team at times, and in some way or another to have a foot in the camp. Still very, very special.
Yeah. And over these 19 years, what would you say have been some of the standout moments for you as a commentator and analyst?
So definitely spending time at the World Cup. 99 was cool. It was nice, but it was my first World Cup, but it was a bit of a flit in, flit out. 2003, I spent 7.5 weeks in Australia at the Rugby World Cup. Wow. 2007, I spent about 5 weeks in France at the Rugby World Cup. I was on the field when the Boks won the game, and I was the first person to talk to some of those players, to interview the captain, John Smith. So that was incredibly special. The last Rugby World Cup, I was in the UK for the full 7.5 weeks again. Those are precious times to be in and around the environment of a Rugby World Cup in the major city that's hosting it, to be based there, talking to other rugby players, interviewing them, chatting, hosting them on TV shows. The likes of Sean Fitzpatrick and Gavin Hastings and Jeremy Guscott, who's our guest, through this England series. Those are just incredible moments to be part of that camaraderie, and in particular, you have the Rugby Network to to have those guys as friends and mates and colleagues, and to be with them, George Gregan and it's in book. It's just always incredibly special.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of incredibly special moments, one's coming up now, 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan. I'm interested to know, Joel, with your rugby analyst cap on now, how would you assess South African rugby at this very moment, and what do you see happening heading into the World Cup next year?
So we are ranked number 7 in the world, which is the worst we've ever been, but I'm not always convinced about that ranking system. And maybe it's a good thing. Maybe coming off a low base is not a bad thing. We've had a tough time. We've had a bad few years. Rassi's certainly got some big challenges, but I do believe that we've got a lot of wonderful young talent, and if you can get them playing nicely, that we can become a team that can definitely win that World Cup. I think... I don't know if you've seen the draw. We play New Zealand in our opening game.
Yeah.
I think that is fantastic for us. There's a lot of people out there thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to get smoked and our confidence will be gone. I think at that point, to play New Zealand in the opening game will be brilliant. We'll know exactly where we stand. If we beat them, fantastic. If we lose, it's okay. Because we'll know what we need to work on. We'll know how to approach things in Japan. We'll know what's required of us in the rest of our journey. And most importantly, we'll only be able to meet New Zealand again in the final.
Yeah.
So it's a big challenge for Rusty coming up. But looking ahead to the next World Cup, I do think with the talent we've got and the journey we're on and the draw we got, in some small little way, I think our stars are aligned.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Time will only tell. Now, Joel, you're very, very active. I mean, you've got your business interests, you've got your media work, you've also got your family. How do you make sure that you don't focus too much on one and neglect the others?
So I think balance to life is a critical thing, and what you left out there is my training. I'm an avid mountain biker and a race, and I've set myself some big challenges for next year because I've got a charity as well that we're raising money for. We've got a wonderful program we're about to launch around eyesight and the vision of kids at school. So it is a tricky thing. Balance is everything, but it's about priority. And in my life, family is obviously first. I think like for everyone. I have a daughter who's third year medical student at Wits. I have a son who's in matric and a gorgeous wife, and that for me is the critical thing. And then right behind that, obviously our business is our future, our destiny. It's what funds our lifestyle. And we have a lot of people who are dependent on us. We have about 400 employees now. So it's, that is obviously important. And then behind that comes the TV, which is, mainly Saturday afternoons locally, every now and then a bit of travel. And obviously a healthy body is a healthy mind. So I do try and, make sure I find the time to train. It is about balance and it is about priorities.
Yeah. Well, speaking about the cycling, Joel, I left it out on purpose because I wanted to touch on that next, because you are quite a bit of a cycling nut. So much so you recently finished third in the Grand Masters division at the Cape Epic. What is it about cycling that interests you so much? And do you see any comparisons with it with your rugby career?
So what I think there must be a comparison somehow, and that's maybe why it's such a drug for me. It's if I think back on rugby, I never used to enjoy pre-season training because it was really tough, but cycling is really tough. And what I found about mountain biking in particular is what you put in beforehand ensures that you're able to race well and enjoy your racing. And it's about training hard, and it's about pushing your boundaries, and it's about just testing yourself a little bit and pushing that boundary a little further and a little further. It's the constant challenging of yourself against, not just against other riders, but against the mountains and the routes and the climbs and everything around it. And the ability to challenge yourself physically is for me what drives me. And right now I've done a few full Ironmans and a whole lot of half Ironmans, and I've never done comrades. And after finishing the Epic, 2 or 3 months ago, I was watching the Ironman on TV, and I haven't done Ironman since I shattered my collarbone. And I thought, that's it. Next year I'm doing Ironman. And then one of my colleagues here said, well, look, if you're going to do Ironman, why don't you do comrades as well and make it a big one? and all of a sudden that challenge has become Epic, Ironman, 2 Oceans, and comrades. So it is, I don't know, there is something about pushing yourself to the extreme physically that in a way it might be masochistic in many ways, but the the joy I get out of it and the sense of achievement and competing in those events is something to behold.
Yeah, and you can hear you speak with it with such passion. Now, finally, Joel, you are in a position quite often to speak with professional rugby players on a regular basis. In any of the conversations that you've had with them, have you been able to gauge if they are interested in putting plans in place for life after rugby?
So there's no doubt in the last little while there's been a move towards it, and I know that because one of our business in the AI space, Pivotal Talent, we've consulted a little bit to Saracens Rugby Club. We've got one of the agents here in Johannesburg who's having all his players assessed, and we're giving advice on future careers post rugby, and he's trying to tee up that all his clients are already in some way put on that parallel track towards a second career post, the day they can't play the game anymore. So there's definitely a movement towards it. I think the players have come to realize that, injury is a serious risk in this game, and that if they do get injured, it's a problem. It's career ending, it's income threatening, and as much as there's probably some form of payout as a result of a big injury, it certainly doesn't give them the purpose I spoke about earlier to get up and get out of bed after rugby. It certainly means that at some point they will need to go out and find another way to earn a salary. And it's not easy out there, in this country. As we have a high unemployment rate. There's not a lot of job opportunity out there at present. And especially if you understand and know how tough it is and how competitive it is for all those jobs out there. So the guys are making a concerted effort. What is, for me, it's very good the way it's happening is that all the rugby bodies are now talking about it and talking about, fighting depression and fighting post-rugby injuries and getting help and addressing the issues. The suicide of Dan Vickerman triggered it, and there's been one or two other players who've had issues, but addressing those issues which have threatened the existence of past players. And as much as the players are thinking about it, the bodies that look after the players are thinking about it too, and I think that collective effort will make a difference.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, Joel, it's been incredibly special to have a rugby legend like you join us on the Rugby Business Network podcast. Thank you for sharing your stories, your advice with all of us, and all the best going forward with Pivotal Capital and all the other interests and passions that you have on in your life.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been nice chatting, and look forward to maybe chatting again one day in the future.
As well as connecting business people to each other, the Rugby Business Network helps rugby-related charities to meet business people. We also run our own Life After Rugby program, which helps pro and ex-pro players for free to transition from pro rugby to business via work placements or jobs, or starting their own businesses. Visit therugbybusinessnetwork.com today and help rugby to help people.